Welcome. I am so glad that you have joined me today. We're continuing in our study of the book of Judges, and we'll be looking at Judges chapter 14 today, continuing our study in Samson. So grab yourself a cuppa and we'll get started. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I really look forward to reading some of your comments. So, Samson's marriage. Throughout our study of Judges, we've seen God use a range of characters to achieve his purposes. We've seen him use men who are reluctant, like Barak and Gideon, or men that are rejected, like Jephthah. And God doesn't necessarily follow our ideas of what a leader should look like. And in this study, we'll see again how God uses the unlikely people to rescue Israel. And as we look into the life of Samson, we're going to see that he was far from perfect. Despite his tremendous flaws, God uses Samson to deliver Israel from the Philistines. Let's look at verse 1. Samson went down to Timnah and he saw a young Philistine woman. So Samson goes to Timnah, which was a Philistine city in Canaan, and there he saw a woman. Here is a quote by a man called Samuel Ridout. The very first act of his, that is Samson's, life shows that we cannot emphasize too much the importance of the first step. It is the first step that costs. It's the first step that opens the way to all of our subsequent steps. For a young man who is going to enter upon a career of service to God, how absolutely necessary it is for the first steps he takes to be in the right direction. So we look at Samson's first step, and what a first step it was. I do like that quote. So this verse states that Samson, he saw a woman. This Hebrew word saw is the same word that we use when we see David when he saw Bathsheba bathing in 2 Samuel verse 11. And so we know immediately, we know where this is going to be heading. The Hebrew word for woman here means more than just a female adult. It means wife. So to some extent, this woman has either already been married or is married. Where she is currently, whether she's currently in a marriage or whether she's been widowed, it is unclear. And even before his birth, Samson is dedicated to God. But already it doesn't look like Samson is living as one dedicated to the Lord. He's already traveling into Philistine territory, and we don't know why. I don't know what his purpose was for being there, but he's certainly having a good time looking at the women there. And it does not appear to indicate that Samson is seeking to follow God or acknowledge him. Verse 2. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I've seen a Philistine woman at Timnah. Now get her for me to be my wife. And his father and his mother replied, Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all your people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to be your wife? But Samson said to his father, Go, get her for me. She is the right one for me. So Samson's request to his parents, he requests that they get this Philistine woman to be his wife. So marrying a Philistine woman was like making an alliance with the enemy instead of resisting them. Choosing to marry an enemy was a direct rebellion against God's will, including God's presumed plans for Samson. As it happened, God's plan to use this rebellious streak to weaken the Philistines' control. We see that in verse 4. So rightly, his parents appear to object to his request, pointing him toward a better option for finding a more suitable wife among the Israelites. But Samson insists that his father get her for him because apparently, in his opinion, she is the right one for him. The New King James Version says, Get her for me, for she pleases me well. And Samson didn't ask whether it would be pleasing to the Lord, but he was just thinking about himself, that it was pleasing for him. So let us not be self-pleasing. Even Christ himself wasn't self-pleasing. He said to the Lord, Yet not my will, but yours be done. Here's another quote by Samuel Ridout. Here is a young man going to enter the career of service to our God. How important that he should make no alliance that will hinder his usefulness in service. How important that every step should be taken in dependence of God, with earnest prayer and guidance, particularly in so important a step as for choosing a partner and a companion. how absolutely important it is that she should be of the same mind with himself. First of all, she should be one with the Lord's people, surely. And besides, she should have a faith and an obedience with, she has like faith and obedience with himself. Samson, he had everything going for him, but his arrogance leads him to embracing a sense of entitlement. We learn about one thing, his key weaknesses in Samson. He is impulsive, he is weak-willed, and he is selfish. He always seems to thoughtlessly react to his desires. He does not consider before he reacts with his lustful and vengeful desires, and he also rejects godly counsel and advice from his parents. This weakness will be used against Samson again and again, and it seems that everybody is aware of this weakness except him. And we can learn from Samson's mistakes so that we don't have to learn ourselves by making the same mistakes ourselves. Choosing a wife should never be based on how she looks, because charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. We see that in Proverbs 31. 1 Peter verse 3 says, beauty should not come from outward adornments such as the elaborate hairstyles or the wearing of gold or jewelry or fine clothes, but rather it should come from the inner self, the unfading beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which is of great worth in God's sight. So what's on the inside, that's what counts. Verse 4, his parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel. So did Samson's parents obey God's command and raise him as a Nazirite devoted to God? Yes and no. They were imperfect parents, but God knew this, and he knew that their imperfect parenting and Samson's weaknesses were going to be the very tool that God would use to defeat the Philistines. And I find that comforting, despite my best efforts in parenting, my imperfections and my mistakes cannot thwart God's purposes for my children. God still is seeking occasion to use my children for his plan. I make plenty of parenting mistakes, and I have instilled in my children many bad habits, but there is no parenting mistake that God cannot repair. Though I've unintentionally passed on some less than desirable characteristic traits, there is no parental mishap beyond God's redemptive touch. And my children will receive the blessing of seeing God work in their lives as he heals the damage I've caused them. And what grace my children will receive, the blessing of witnessing God's transforming work in their lives, seeing firsthand how God weaves and how God works, even our family's shortcomings, into his great design. How amazing is our God that he can use our weaknesses for his glory. Verse 4, we learn here that God wants to use Samson despite his failings, or even because of his failings. Samson wants to marry a woman from the very people he's supposed to be defeating. And may we rightly feel a sense of shock and surprise that his parents agree. God uses behaviour which seems entirely out of place to achieve victory against the Philistines. It's easy to judge Samson's parents, accusing them of not parenting Samson or preventing Samson from marrying into the Philistines. But it does say something, that this marriage was from the Lord. That's what it says. Samson needed access to the Philistines. And I believe that this means that God used Samson's actions and his choices, not that he approved of them. He didn't approve that Samson was going to take a Philistine's wife, but he used it nonetheless. Verse 5, Samson went down to Timnah together with his father and mother, and they approached the vineyards of Timnah. Suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as he might have torn a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done. And then he went down and he talked to the woman, and he liked her. So it wasn't just Samson's personal strength that enabled him to defeat the lion. It was that the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. And it's a great point to remind ourselves that in the Old Testament, the Spirit of the Lord came upon people. So they came upon prophets, judges, kings, and you can easily look up those instances yourself using an online concordance. But in the New Testament, after Pentecost, the Spirit inhabits those who believe in him. And most Christians believe that the Spirit permanently inhabits believers. And we are privileged this side of the cross to have a permanent indwelling of our Creator, the Creator of the universe, in us, the wonderful Counselor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace. After killing the lion, Samson's deceitful nature is revealed. He does not tell his father or his mother who were travelling with him. Why? Perhaps because he knew that because of his Nazirite vow, he wasn't allowed to touch a dead body. If he touched a dead body, he would be considered unclean. Verse 7, when Samson visited the Philistine woman, and this time he actually strikes up a conversation with her, he starts to like her. It doesn't seem much to base a marriage upon, but God is going to use it anyhow. Verse 8, sometimes later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside and looked at the lion's carcass, and he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands, and he ate it as he went along. And when he rejoined his parents, he gave them some, and they ate it too. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. Again, Samson touches a dead body and doesn't tell his parents. But this time it's more troubling because he basically tricks them into eating defiled food by not telling them where it came from. And the account repeatedly says he did not tell his parents. And so it doesn't seem that Samson ever is interested in keeping the fifth commandment, to honour your father and mother. The commandment's in Exodus 20, verse 12. Verse 10, now his father went down to see this woman, and there Samson held a feast, as it was customary for young men, and when the people saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. So when the people, that is the Philistines, when they saw him, they chose 30 men to be his companions. So what kind of companions are these men who is the bitter enemy of their people? What kind of man would they have chosen to be his companions? Just in relation to this, there's just some interesting theological viewpoints. Samson went down to the Philistine to marry one woman. This is Simon Ridout again. And he finds 30 Philistines as companions. You're only going to adapt one principle that is not quite scriptural. You adopt one principle and you take it into your bosom. Take a single Philistine principle into your bosom and say, this pleases me well. You take one. You are just going to marry one Philistine female and find your house full. You have got 30 and they're companions for you. They are your friends. They are your spiritual companions. You cannot adopt one unscriptural principle without finding a whole host of others equally unscriptural that follow with it. Thank you, Ridout. Josephus, he has an interesting comment. He tells us that there were 30 Philistines that were sent to guard him. The LXX here adds that they were afraid of him because Samson was an awesome physical person, and so this may have been true. Verse 12, let me tell you a riddle, Samson said. If you can give me the answer within 7 days of the feast, I will give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. If you can't tell me the answer, you must give me 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. Tell us your riddle, they said. Let's hear it. We'll follow that in a second. So the story continues with Samson making a proposition to his companions at the wedding. Samson issues a challenge to the people at the wedding feast, and if they can guess the riddle, they owe him 30 linen garments, which is sort of more the everyday clothes, and 30 sets of clothes, so possibly more fancy clothes. But if they guessed it, Samson owns them the same. And again, we see Samson's deceitful nature, and he is their guest, and he tries to take advantage of his 30 companions by asking him this riddle. So let's go on a little side journey. Some interesting facts about some linen clothes. Flax is used to make linen. And linen is typically 30% stronger than cotton, although cotton wasn't used until the Ptolemaic times, so they wouldn't have had cotton here. Due to its molecular structure, linen cloth can absorb 1/5 of its weight in water, and it won't feel damp until it's more wet than that. So a linen shirt can absorb lots of perspiration, and it is unlikely to feel clammy as the water evaporates off the linen as quickly as it evaporates off the surface of a puddle. Linen fabric was graded on the basis of its coarseness, and it wasn't often dyed. So it usually was that sort of linen colour that we usually see. Linen is grown from linseed, and that's where you get linseed oil, so linseed, linen. The seed is grown and the flax is harvested and combed into a finer flax, and then it is woven into fabric. There's some trivia for you for linen. Okay, so let's hear the riddle. So verse 14. He replied, "Out of the eater something to eat, out of the strong something sweet." And for 3 days they could not give an answer. Because we have the advantage of knowing the backstory, it's not hard to understand Samson's riddle. He found some sweet food inside a lion. Verse 15. On the 4th day, they said to Samson's wife, "Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal your property?" Then Samson's wife threw herself on him, sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle, but you haven't even told the answer to me." "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother," he replied. "So why should I explain it to you?" And she cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the 7th day, he finally told her because she continued to press him. She, in turn, explained the riddle to her people. So Samson's companions, they were having difficulty solving the riddle. And since they don't want to lose the bet, they take this aggressive approach in threatening Samson's wife. They threaten her with her life and the life of her family. And the threat was no way reasonable or rational or proportional, and it seems to be exacerbated because of their pride. They accuse her of being part of this, they accuse her of being part of this deceitful conspiracy scheme to defraud them out of their property, but in reality she had nothing to do with it. But now she's caught between a rock and a hard place. Should she ignore Samson's companions or die? Should she manipulate or deceive her husband? Perhaps there was a third option. She was, after all, married to Samson. She was his wife. She was united with him. Perhaps she should have just told Samson the full story and let him sort out the problem he had made. He made the problem. He should have sorted it out. Verses 16 and 17, then Samson's wife uses a strategy to try and get him to tell the solution of the riddle. She dramatically throws herself on him and cries. She employs manipulative and narcissistic words and phrases to control and undermine him. "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle and you haven't even told me." Samson's wife did not need to resort to these tactics if she had just been upfront with her. Her approach to this reveals her character. She just does not have the strength or the wisdom to handle it better. Samson explains that he does not need to tell her, and his reasoning explains that he hasn't. So he explains that the rationale behind him not telling her is that he hasn't even told his parents yet, and he unintentionally reveals what position and what status he considers his wife to be. That is, she's below his parents. And he puts more priority on his parents than on his wife, and it reveals how important she really is to him. He has done the leaving and cleaving. He hasn't done this. He hasn't done the leaving and cleaving that's required in the Bible in Genesis 2, verses 24. And we can also see evidence that Samson's wife does not see herself bound to Samson, stronger than any other relationship. She uses the words "her people" in Judges 14, verse 17. But as a married woman, she had a new family to consider. Her and Samson were a new family, and that should have been her people. And this approach showed disrespect for her husband and a lack of compassion and selflessness and genuine love. Because of her persistent pestering, Samson is exacerbated by 10 days of crying. He's worn down by her nagging, and he caves in and explains the meaning of the riddle. And then, of course, she went and told her people. Verse 18, before sunset on the 7th day, the men of the town said to him, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" And Samson said to them, "If you had not ploughed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, and he went down to Ashkelon and struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything, and gave their clothes to those he had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's house. So Samson's wife had told the solution of the riddle to her people, and the men of the city came to Samson, and they told the answer of the riddle to him. Samson immediately perceives that the only reason they unravelled the answer to the riddle was because they had extracted it out of his wife. So verse 18, if you had not ploughed with my heifer, you would have not solved the riddle. So Samson uses this proverb. It reveals the bitterness he felt in being manipulated. Samson's wife won what she wanted through manipulation, and she lost her husband's heart. When a man gives into his wife's manipulation so as to keep the peace, it always builds anger and resentment in the man, and guilt in the woman for what she had did. The way of manipulation is tempting because it kind of works, but it always brings real destruction. Verse 19. In this verse we see confirming that the Lord was still with Samson, even in his foolishness. This is the second time in this chapter that the Spirit of the Lord has come upon him. And what does he do with this endowment of strength? He goes and kills 30 men and stole their clothes to pay for losing the bet with his companions. Enraged and embarrassment at having this riddle guessed, Samson strikes down 30 men to pay his debt. And it seems that Samson has used God's given strength for his own advantage. Samson uses the power that God has given him he doesn't use it to free the Israelites, but he uses it to settle his own score. Verse 9, burning with anger, he returned to his father's home. Now, when I first studied this passage, I missed the fact that he only got angry after killing the 30 men. Initially, I thought that he had killed the men in anger and fury, but that's not the case because the anger came afterwards. So I wrongly thought that Samson's anger was a burning, furious anger, like the anger that we see in Jonah. Jonah's anger was of such severe intensity, and the language in Jonah was so strong. It means to burn or to be kindled with anger, to be hot as wax, to be furious. But Jonah's anger is different to what we see in Samson. It's a totally different word. The Hebrew word here in Judges for Samson's anger it describes it as nose, face, nostril type anger. And realising this, I now understand that it is not Samson. I now understand that it is not that Samson is just angry about losing the bet or the trust of his wife and then lashes out in some unrestrained fury. It's more that he is frustrated with the whole situation. His foolish decisions, his wife's deception, his messed up marriage, having to kill 30 men who didn't actually deserve it, and what's been done to him and what he's done to others. The mess he's made and the devastation that he leaves in his wake. And possibly feeling a heavy sense of guilt and shame, it's enough to give him a headache. It's enough to give him nostril, nose, face type of anger. There is an anger. There's a type of anger, and then there's another type of anger. Anger can be a controlled feeling. Anger can also be an unrestrained, aggressive action. Anger is helpful to protect our rights from being infringed, and it helps motivate us to become attentive to our needs. And anger can be used in a constructive way to be helpful when it's used respectfully. But when anger is applied the wrong way, it is harming and it damages others. So be careful how you handle your anger. Verse 20, and Samson's wife was given to one of his companions who had attended him at the feast. This chapter ends on a sad note as Samson's wife is given to another man. And we'll find out in the next chapter why this was done without his knowledge. And in the next chapter, we will discover why she was given to another man. So just concluding, just summarising everything we've seen in this chapter. In honesty, I have been challenged to think through some tough questions in this chapter. Like, why does God give Samson power only for him to abuse it? Why does God continue to use Samson when he doesn't even honour him? Why does the Spirit of the Lord come upon Samson only for him to seemingly abuse such powers? And the only conclusion that I can make is that God continues to use Samson for his purpose. He still uses his foolish mistakes, his poor judgment, his selfish motives, and his dishonouring actions. God still uses all of it for his purpose. He still uses all our foolishness. He uses our poor judgments, our selfish motives, and our dishonouring actions for his purpose. Let's look at Romans 8:28. We know this verse. And we know that in all things, God works together for good for those who love him, who have been called according to his purposes. And we often read Romans 1:28 in the context of anything bad that happens to us, that God will use those things for good. But let's be real with ourselves. Sometimes the bad things that happen to us are a result of our own choices. And God still promises to use those difficulties for his glory too. And here in this crazy story of Samson, God is constantly moving in this story to achieve his great plan of redeeming the Israelites from the oppression of the Philistines. It fills me with awe to contemplate how God has worked through such an imperfect judge to restore the chosen people of Israel. And how much more profound then is the revelation that he sent his perfect Son to bring salvation to all humanity. How much more superior is that salvation, a permanent and a pure redemption from sin that could never have been achieved by an ordinary man, but was achieved by Jesus Christ, who knew no sin, but laid down his life as a ransom for many. Christ is superior. And that's all I have for you from Judges 14 today. It's been a pleasure spending time with you, and I look forward to next time when we'll continue with the story of Samson as we study Judges chapter 15. Bye.